She is a great wife and a mother of 3 beautiful kids who I adore. And she's really one of my favorite people in the world, and I'm blessed to call her a friend. I think a woman who needs no introduction, Ivanka Trump.
Here comes the sun, and I say, it's all right.
So nice to be here.
Isn't this great? I know.
Great.
I know. Everyone's so happy you're here in Florida, and especially in Tampa, which is my hometown. So we're so happy to have you here. So we just wanted to ask you a few questions. The first is, the administration has done so much with COVID-19 and saved so many lives. Ivanka, can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, obviously this is first of all, hello, everyone. It is great to be here, and Tampa is a place I've long loved, and it's always good to be back in the Sunshine State, so it's terrific to be here in Florida, and with one of Florida's finest, the legendary Pam Bondi, who's been a friend for so long, so thank you for hosting us here. And we felt a very warm welcome. We actually went and got some amazing Cuban bread right from the plane on the route here. So we're feeling good, and we're excited to be here today. And thank you to our hosts for hosting us at this amazing restaurant with such a storied history. And this is the type of business that was so important for the president, obviously working with the governors, taking care of the safety needs and making sure that every governor had what they needed to deal with this novel virus. Everyone was learning real time. He did the things that he needed to do on a federal level, stopping travel from China, stopping travel from Europe, long before it became an obvious thing to do. But then it became about how do we ensure that each of the governors have what they need. Some governors manage their inventories better than other governors. So making sure that they had PPE, making sure that no American died because of lack of a ventilator. And that was a Herculean effort in itself, because making a face mask is very different from the complicated machinery that is a ventilator. So he brought his business sensibility to bear in mobilizing the full of government, but also leaning on the private sector to do what they do best. And just an interesting story, I was in Detroit last week, and I was with Mary Barra, and they had just delivered the last shipment of 30,000 ventilators.
30,000.
30,000 fulfilling their contract. Keep in mind, the federal government had less than that when this all started, because the stockpile had been depleted. So I was with Mary Barra, and she was telling me that as they started to think about how they could take their car factory and retrofit it for the purpose of helping Americans in this time of crisis, one of their brilliant engineers realized that the hardest, most complex part of a ventilator is very, very similar to the transition of a car. So the transistor of a car and the ventilator, so it actually shaved a lot of time off of their production capabilities, and that's why a lot of the car companies ended up stepping up. So this is the type of thing that it can't only be government. We never would have figured that out. It can't only be the private sector. They have to work in concert to achieve real results. So working with the governors to ensure what they had what they need, and then making sure that Americans had the relief they deserve. This is no fault of anyone here. It's no fault of any American business owner or any American citizen. So how do we protect them, and how do we safeguard them during this very vulnerable period of time? So just to single out one thing, and here in Florida, the PPP program alone, the Paycheck Protection Program, benefited close to 500,000 Florida small businesses, and as a result, saved 3.8 million jobs. 3.8 million jobs. So small business is the heart of our communities. It's the heart of our economy, and really the backbone of it, employing roughly 50% of all people in this country. And they are also most vulnerable to this complete interruption of their business. I mentioned I came from a bakery.
La Segunda.
Yes, Raise your hand if you know it. Probably everyone.
Everybody should know. Yeah, the only Cuban bread place in town, right?
They've been in business for over 100 years, and they were gearing up to shut their doors because they couldn't afford payroll, they couldn't afford the overhead without a market to supply to, and many of the people that were their primary customers, like this amazing restaurant, were forced to close. So getting them the relief they need in record speed was truly a Herculean process. Congress doesn't move very quickly, and we worked with them to move them quickly. What they didn't do, we did administratively, and we designed an incredible program that saved a lot of small businesses and the livelihoods of many people in a community. Once those businesses close, it's very hard to reopen. So this is critical.
That's right. Well, thank you for all of that. You know, the president built really an incredible economy. I think the best in our nation's history, one of the best in the world. And can you tell us really how he created, a little bit about how he created this unprecedented economy and unemployment rate in our country?
Well, it's also a particularly timely question because some data came out yesterday from the census covering 2019. And all of you have heard about the amazing metrics, pretty much every demographic, from Hispanic Americans, African Americans, people without a college degree, even disabled Americans, every single category, veterans, every category you can name that they track experienced the lowest rate of unemployment in history. Remarkable. So the economy was just firing on all cylinders. Actually, the biggest problem for employers were not having enough people with the skills they needed to fill their job vacancies, which is unheard of. So what was happening is people were coming off the sidelines because employers were investing the resources to give them the training they need to fill the jobs that they wanted filled. So it was really a beautiful thing to see. Actually, in 2019, of all the new jobs created, Pam, 72% of them went to people who had been fully out of the workforce. Not even on unemployment, completely out of the workforce. And they were coming into the labor market for the first time because employers were putting them through training programs. The president launched our Pledge to America's Workers, where 400 companies committed to upskilling and retraining 16 million Americans.
That's amazing.
All private sector, private sector
16
dollars.
million.
16 million Americans. So this was the environment, and that still exists today. Once we get rid of this plague, that is there. The foundation is there. We cut taxes, and the president will cut them further when he's reelected. He renegotiated some of our worst trade deals, starting with the job-killing NAFTA, now USMCA, which has such a tremendous impact on the economy here in Florida. But going through all of these trade deals and thinking about how he can make American trade benefit American workers. Sounds simple, but this was not happening, and it had been decades of more of the same, really offshoring American jobs. Energy independence, remarkable. 2 decades ago, 1 decade ago, if you said that America would be a net exporter of energy, it would be unheard of. So it is very exciting when you think about the foundation that's there. And once we're able to really open up, and once we're able to let the reins go on this horse, we're really going to take off, and we're quite excited about that.
You know, and this is everything he promised to do and did.
Absolutely. So I actually had started by talking about the census report that came out yesterday. That it's the report documenting inequality and poverty. So it was for the year of 2019. For the first time in 50 years, poverty went down. First time in 50 years, poverty went down in this country, and inequality shrunk because the fastest wage earners were the lowest quartile. So and a lot of this was driven by women and minorities entering the workforce. So it is really a remarkable success story.
And you had a lot to do with that. My friend is very humble. She's had lots of incredible things that you've done. Thank you. You know, when President Trump took office, he wasn't scared to shake things up in Washington, D.C. And he certainly did that in a very good way, and he hasn't been afraid to reach across the aisle at all. Could you tell us some of the problems that he helped solve and what benefited our nation by things that he's done in a different way, unconventional, we could call it?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say that Washington, D.C. hasn't changed Donald Trump. Donald Trump has changed Washington, and nothing could be more true. And also, nothing could be more rare, sadly, because I see so many people who go to Washington and they get sucked into the vortex, and they lose their compass, and they forget what they're fighting for. And it is easier to go with the flow. It is easier to keep the status quo. And it is also easier to wave around a piece of paper that you've introduced with everything that your district wants in it for a piece of legislation you committed to passing, and not do the work of building coalitions, negotiating, actually getting it passed into law. And I see that so often, where people say, well, I've got a bill for that. Okay. Well, is it a bipartisan bill? Have you secured enough votes to actually move it? There are people who have a bill for something for 15 years that they campaign on each time, saying, well, I've got this great bill. So a lot of people don't either do the work, or it's just easier not to compromise. There's no backlash if you just say, you know, these are the bullet points that, that we're putting forward. So in a city where it's like turning a battleship to get anything done, with a person who's used to operating a speedboat, it was a very different environment. And he acclimated to it and got an enormous number of bipartisan things done. Who would have thought, and obviously it's a very timely issue these days, who would have thought this president would oversee the most sweeping criminal justice reform legislation, fully bipartisan, in the last 30 years? And Pam, you were an incredible part of that. Undoing the Biden crime bill, which disproportionately impacted so negatively African-American communities across the nation.
So many.
So many. So this president was able to deliver on the promise often made and unfulfilled by so many others over the years. That's one example. The Great American Outdoor Act. So the president was here last week talking about the Everglades and what he had done to get funding to Governor DeSantis for Lake Okeechobee and the Everglades. But the Great American Outdoors Act is the largest piece of legislation ever to support our national parks since they were created by Theodore Roosevelt. And most people probably haven't heard about that. It gives permanent funding to our parks so that everyone can enjoy the beautiful outdoor space that none of us take for granted anymore, as with all these stay-at-home orders and the necessity of social distancing. So those two pieces of legislation alone are proof of what he can get done on a bipartisan basis.
He's like no other president. And he, you know, I've heard him say so many times, he's a businessman. This is what he does. And he's running our country like a business.
Well, isn't it shocking to actually know where somebody stands? It's an amazing thing that everyone's so surprised by how blunt he is.
And that he kept his promises.
Well, he likes to joke, and criminal justice reform's an example of this, that he's kept more promises than he's made. Which is very funny, because there were a lot of things he didn't campaign on. He just got done because they were the right thing to do, like the Great American Outdoors Act, which people have been trying for the last 40 years and failing to secure funding. And there's a backlog of maintenance to our great national parks like you wouldn't believe. So he's kept more promises than he's actually made, but it is—
That's a good thing.
It's a great thing. It is, it's really remarkable. In Washington, very few people can look at a politician and say, I really know where they stand on so many issues. You don't really know. You think you know, you guess you know, maybe one or two issues you have confidence that there's sort of a real energy behind. With this president, like it or not, you know exactly where he stands. And there is something honest and beautiful about that. I would argue he's the most authentic president we've ever had. He says what he's thinking.
And that's why the American people love him. So in Latin America, unfortunately, too many women continue to face challenges in starting their own business And I guess access to capital especially. And you've done something really remarkable. Can you tell us about the program that you've launched, WGDP 2X Americas?
Well, even in our hemisphere and here in the United States, one of the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs are Latin American women, Hispanic women. So we need to ensure that they have equal access to capital. And it is harder for women to access capital, even right here in the United States. So we've launched a bunch of domestic programs to narrow that gender capital divide. But also one of the programs we developed, which is the first ever all-of-government approach to women's economic empowerment in developing countries, is called WGDP. And it helps women through vocational education and job training, helping them gain access to capital, and lastly, changing laws that prohibit their full and free participation in the economy. So the last one is the most transformative, because you think about these basic rights that we take for granted, that so many women all across the world, that the United States government gives so much money to the leaders of their country to help them develop, while they're not realizing the potential of half their population. So that's got to stop. We are the most generous country in the world, and we're very proud of that fact. But countries have to make reforms that enable them to achieve the goal of self-reliance. So just two examples, in 114 countries, 1.4 billion women aren't able to work in the same industries as men. It's crazy.
Let that soak in.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And just the ability to travel freely. How can you run a business if you can't secure a visa? What if you can't open a bank account? And it wasn't that long ago here in the United States, women needed their husband to co-sign to get a credit card. Well, that exists in many countries still around the world. But actually that gives me hope, because it wasn't that long ago. My mother would remember that. And that makes me think that we have an ability to really move the needle on this front. And that, it's not the money, because the money we're putting behind this program, is much of it is coming from the private sector, and we love doing that because we want them to be creating the jobs in these economies. But really changing the laws and having tough conversations with the people receiving development assistance is really important. In Latin America, when I traveled there, we launched 2X, which was also a partnership with the private sector. It was so successful, Citibank joined us and then doubled the commitment. So now $1 billion in capital for small and medium-sized female-owned businesses is available through this program, just focusing on South America. So we're very excited about that and getting access to these amazing small business owners. And that was a gap. There was a lot of microfinance that existed, but once proof of concept was there, once they had their stores open or they had their salon set up, they weren't able to scale because they couldn't access the capital. So the hard part, in some ways, developing the business plan, opening, running successfully, that had been accomplished, but they weren't able to scale. And when they scale is when they start to hire from within their community. And we all know that when women make money, they invest back into their families, back into their community, into things that have a profound impact like health, education. So it's a very good investment, and I was really excited to be in Colombia and Paraguay and Argentina when we made that announcement.
Now, you also went to Colombia near the Venezuelan border.
I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that impacted you?
Yeah, I went to Cucuta, and it's devastating. I mean, there really is no other word to describe it. And you speak to Colombians, and they share, the relative wealth of Venezuela. Venezuela had always been the strong country on their border that they would go to for opportunities, and now Venezuelans are coming into Colombia for opportunities. But it is awful. I met a woman who had walked across Venezuela for 7 days, pushing her son in a wheelchair because he needed to receive a medicine that would have been easily available in any hospital in Venezuela years ago. I mean, this isn't, but they don't have electricity, so they can't keep basic medicine like diabetes medicine. And she pushed her son, young boy, he was 10 or 11, across the country for 7 days to receive this medication so his leg wouldn't be amputated. And I met her at the border, and I talked with her about her challenges. She left her baby son behind with her husband, and she didn't know if they'd ever be reunited. And it's so sad. And the worst part, and there are many bad parts, but it's man-made. This is a totally preventable situation. But you've got a tyrant in leadership there in Maduro, and it's causing tremendous hardship. So America is actually the largest donor of anyone in the world to help the Venezuelans through oftentimes proxies. We're helping fund Colombia because it's difficult to accept the number of people who are coming into their country, and they've been doing so really with open arms. So we've been helping them out in that regard.
And, you know, I'm smiling because I watched this woman work firsthand. She goes nonstop. Sorry, I'm going to digress for a minute. This is a wife, a mother of 3 little ones who are wonderful, a handful. They're wonderful, and a handful. And I don't know how she does it. I mean, she is changing the world single-handedly. So thank you for that, my friend. Thank you. Over the past 3 years, did you ever think that you would be doing this? Crazy, isn't it?
I still pinch myself, but what an opportunity to give back to a country that's given me so much.
Not
And
just
no,
one
I
life.
never thought I'd be doing it, but
Helping so many people.
when my father asked me, there was no way I could look back in 20 or 30 years and reflect on my life and feel comfortable had I not volunteered for service. And like I said, given back to a country that's been so good to me and my family. So it's the greatest honor in the world.
That's right. Well, you're helping so many. Over the past 3.5 years, the president and his entire administration have accomplished an incredible amount, and he's kept his promises, as we said, to the American people. Tell us a little bit about one of the promises that's your favorite that we haven't talked about yet.
Oh, goodness.
A lot of them, right?
There's so many. You know, one of the interesting ones, which 3 prior presidents had promised and failed to deliver on, that is so relevant because of the peace accords we signed 2 days ago in the Middle East. Peace between Israel and 2 other countries in the Middle East, something that hasn't been accomplished in 25 years. A lot of it was built off the momentum of moving the embassy to Jerusalem.
Which no one said could be done.
Which everyone said there, but this is an example of why it often doesn't pay to change the status quo. People say, people come out of the woodworks and all the problems, all the reasons why you can't keep your promise. And he refused to heed that, and he wanted to keep his promise because it was the right thing to do. And the results are bearing fruit. For me, on a personal level, I worked really, really hard on tax reform. I traveled across the country meeting with lawmakers, talking with constituents in their district when they had a tough vote on it, and helping craft what was really a tremendous plan to both help our corporations and small businesses be competitive while also supporting American families. So those dual values of work and family. One element of it that I'm personally very proud of is the double child tax credit. So now 40 million American families, and this is an annual thing, but in 2019 alone, 40 million American families benefited from the child tax credit, putting an average of $2,200 in their pockets.
And that was Ivanka.
So it's at the president's direction.
Yeah, right. No, and the president, of course, but that was a mother of 3 small kids who did that.
Look, raising, regardless of your life decisions, whether you're a homemaker, I don't like to say a working mother because I know, for one, I am more exhausted on a Monday morning than I am on a Friday night. So I think working mothers are the ones that are actually at home. But whether you're staying home and raising your family or you're working and need to high quality childcare or daycare to be able to support that family, it is expensive raising children, and we all want the best for them. So $2,000 per child into the pocket of 40 million American families is extraordinary. So I'm very excited about that.
You know, one thing you touched on, and I don't think I've told you this yet, but my favorite the favorite thing you've tweeted, and it just gives me chills. It's Jared and Robert O'Brien on the first commercial flight from Israel to the UAE. I mean, if you haven't seen her tweet on that, it's a video of Jared. I think they're videoing it on the plane.
So my husband's a very private person. He doesn't have Twitter. He doesn't use, I mean, he may have an account, but he doesn't use social media or any of these things. So he sent me that as just look how extraordinary.
cool
He
this is.
wanted to share the experience with me. And
Did you tell him you were going to tweet it?
After I did. I figured, he was on a flight. What was I going to do?
I love it.
But it was so beautiful because he got the recording of the pilot talking about how extraordinary this flight was, the fact that the word peace was written on the plane in English, in Hebrew, and in Arabic, the fact that they were flying over, which nobody had known at this point, Saudi Arabian airspace. For the first time in the history of Israel, they had gotten permission, and now Saudi Arabia has agreed to open up all flights over their airspace coming from Israel, which is an enormous deal in its own right and extraordinary. Nobody would have thought that was possible. So to hear the pilot talk about how the flight was only going to be 3 hours as opposed to what would have been 8 hours if they had to go around Saudi Arabia, and talk with such emotion about the historic nature of this flight was really beautiful. And it was really sweet to see how happy my husband and Robert O'Brien looked.
I know, but well, yeah, they're so cute. They were just smiling ear to ear. It was so sweet. So if you get a chance to, I retweeted it, but Ivanka tweeted it. I keep watching it. I show it to everyone about, that's world peace right there, what everyone's done.
And when you think about, obviously, all peace should be, that's the greatest goal, and that's
In our world.
should be our collective desire. But the implications of that for Americans in terms of our treasure, in terms of our troops, which are our greatest treasure, and Florida knows this well, with representation of all 5 branches right here in the state of our great military, but bringing home our troops, ending these endless wars, eliminating decades-old conflicts, so that we need less of a presence in a region, and we can take that money and reinvest in our rural communities, reinvest in our inner cities, reinvest in choice for our children in terms of the schools that they're able to go to, which Florida's done beautifully. That's the goal.
That's right. Well, now, speaking of children, we have some questions from the audience. And I think I see Olivia Alvarez out there. Olivia, do you want to ask
Hi, Olivia.
Ms. Trump your question? And you're dressed like her. I love your dress. It's beautiful.
I love your
color.
mask. I love that. Sunflower.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I'm in the 3rd grade. What's the best advice your dad has given you about when you were in 3rd grade?
First of all, that was amazing.
That's great.
That was amazing. And you're just starting the 3rd grade? Talk about reading. That's incredible, Olivia.
What is the best advice your dad has given you about school?
About school, other than work hard? No, he didn't actually. I have to say that because your mom's listening, so work very hard. So I think school and life is the same. He always pushed me and my siblings, and actually everyone around him, to strive to find that which they love doing in life. And I'm sure you see this with your parents, but it is very hard to be successful at anything you do, regardless of whether you want to be a very successful entrepreneur or a school teacher or a lawyer, whatever you want to do. It's hard to reach the highest levels if you don't legitimately, genuinely love it, because you can't be as passionate. And when you're not passionate, you don't work as hard. And I'm sure you've noticed this with subjects that you're studying. Some you like a little more than others. Some you're a little more likely to study for than others, but that's true in life. So especially when you're young and you're in school, and it's easier to change course, and it's easier to make different decisions, and you have less responsibilities. That's when it's so important that you really explore different areas that you may be passionate about to find what it is that you uniquely, Olivia, love doing. And when you find that thing, regardless of your age, your background, you'll succeed. You'll follow that path doggedly. So do you know what you love doing, Olivia?
Art.
Art. There you go.
That's amazing. So that's something you should focus your attention on.
You know, and Ivanka was a fashion designer with an incredible business. So, I mean, art could apply to so many things, designing jewelry, designing fashion, actual artwork. There's so much you can do with that.
Also being creative in life. We were talking about the president being a great entrepreneur, but you can be an artist in a lot of different areas, and it means using creativity to achieve your goals. So good luck, Olivia. I'll be rooting for you.
Do we have time for one more question, you think? One more? Okay. Where's Gigi Sabat? There she is. Okay. I think am I going to ask a question for you? I think I have it written out. Okay. This is from Gigi. This is truly the most important election of our lifetime. The choice between President Trump and Joe Biden and what each stands for couldn't be clearer. What more can we be doing here in Florida, I like this question, to help the president get reelected?
Yes, ma'am. Well, first and foremost, volunteering truly matters. We need to continue doing that. And we need to continue taking action in our communities, letting our voices be heard, and also raising awareness in our community in regards to the facts about President Donald Trump. And also, the fact is, President Donald Trump continues to keep America safe. He continues to drain the swamp, and we have great capitalistic growth because of President Trump. And he truly cares about all people.
That's the answer. That's the answer. I mean, I couldn't have said that better myself, so I don't need to say anything else. Get out and vote. Get your friends out and vote for all of those reasons. Let's switch. She makes it look too easy.
Great question, great answer. Thank you very much. All right, I think we have one last question. I think we still have time for it. Okay, where is Josie Tomko? Where's Josie? There she is in the back. There she is. Okay. So Josie's question is, how is the president feeling with less than 50 days, 47 I think today, right, left until Election Day?
He is feeling super energized, and it's amazing. I mean, that energy, which you see, I mean, he's ping-ponging across the country. I think he's going to be in 5 or 6 states this week alone. You need that. You need that energy and that vigor to do the job because the demands upon you. Think about all of the enormously consequential decisions you make each day, and then all of the bureaucracy you contend with, and then all of the things you do ceremonially as part of the role. I mean, it requires enormous strength and enormous energy, and you'll see that. He doesn't get tired, and I remember the last election. It was our last night, and he had done 7 states in one day. It was like 26 hours. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning was the last rally, and he looked at me and said, "You know what? I'm really proud of what we've done, and we've left it all on the field." And he's going to leave it all on the field this time, and I hope all the volunteers leave it all on the field as well, because to the earlier question, this is a battle for the heart and soul of this country and the direction of this country, and we can't take anything for granted.
And he's out there, you know, I talked to him, I told you last night, I think it was 10 o'clock, and I was getting ready to go to sleep, and he was in the Oval Office still signing documents, working. So he's nonstop. And I mean, when you see him in there, and when I see Ivanka in there, just working tirelessly every day, it should make all of us want to get out there and work even harder. I mean, I can't keep up with the man, so I don't know.
It's funny, I used to say, I'm not into politics, I'm into policy, I'm into helping people, but you know, that was never the combative warfare of it all. That was never my thing. But now, to enable us to get the policies that we care so much about implemented, and there's so much more left to do. There's so much more left to do. In order to deliver on the new promises to America, the president needs another 4 more years.
He has to.
So for a little bit, I'm into politics.
Yeah, in a very good way.
And then I'll go right back to being into policy.
The best is yet to come. Thank you. Thank you, Ivanka. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you all for being here to support her. Thank you.